Your silence is all the proof I need. Why won't you just deny it? Tell me I'm wrong. But you can't, can you?
How could you do this to us? Look at these statements, it's all gone.
The day my own son looked me in the eye and called my silence proof of guilt, something inside me broke in a way I don't think will ever fully heal. Ethan stood there, my boy, the one I raised, the one I protected, and he didn't see his mother anymore. He saw a liar, a thief, a woman hiding something ugly, and the worst part, he wasn't wrong about one thing. I was hiding something, but not to protect myself. I was keeping a promise, one that was never meant to survive this long, and certainly not meant to destroy my family in the process. If I had spoken that day, everything would have shattered. So I stayed silent. And they all decided that silence meant guilt. Maybe if you've ever been misunderstood by the people you love, you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. Before we go on, I'd really like to hear from you. Have you ever stayed quiet, not because you were wrong, but because telling the truth would hurt someone you loved? Let me know in the comments. And if you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, tell me where and what time it is. I always read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe if stories like this speak to you. I used to believe that grief either brought families closer or quietly tore them apart. I just never imagined which side mine would fall on. After Charles passed, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every room carried an echo of him, the way he used to hum in the kitchen, the way he'd leave his glasses on the coffee table like he'd be right back. For a while, Ethan came by almost every day. He'd check on me, fix things around the house, sit with me in silence. We didn't always talk much, but I could feel that he still needed me, and I needed him. But that didn't last. Little by little, the visits became shorter. Then, less frequent. Then replaced by quick phone calls. Then nothing unless I reached out first. I told myself it was normal. He had his own family now. His own responsibilities. Melissa, his wife, had always been polite, never warm, but never openly cold either. The kind of woman who smiled without letting you feel it. But after Charles died, something changed in her. She started asking questions, not directly at first, just small things. How are the finances looking now? Did Charles leave everything organized? Are there any debts we should know about? They sounded like practical questions, responsible questions. But there was something underneath them, something sharp. I brushed it off. I told myself I was being sensitive, that grief was making me imagine things. Until the day everything shifted. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Ethan called me. His voice was tight, controlled. "Mom, I need you to come over, now." There was no please, no softness, just urgency. When I walked into their house, I knew something was wrong immediately. Melissa was standing by the kitchen island, arms crossed. Ethan was pacing, running his hand through his hair, the way he used to when he was stressed as a teenager. And Sophie, she was sitting quietly at the table, watching everything like she was trying to piece together a puzzle no one had explained to her. "Luke," Melissa said, not even bothering with Mom. "We need to talk." That was the moment I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was an accusation. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to me. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "There's money missing." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't speak. How much, I asked quietly. He hesitated. $180,000. The number didn't shock me. Not because it wasn't large, but because I already knew Melissa stepped forward, placing a printed bank statement on the counter between us like it was evidence in a courtroom. "It was transferred," she said. "Not withdrawn. Not stolen. Transferred. And guess what, Luke?" She tapped the paper with her finger. "You were the only one with access." I looked down at the statement, the date, the amount, the account. Everything was exactly as I remembered, exactly as Charles had arranged. Ethan watched my face closely. "Mom, did you do this?" There it was. The question that would change everything. I could have answered. I could have explained. I could have told them the truth in one sentence and ended it all right there. But Charles's voice came back to me as clear as the day he said it. Protect him, even from himself. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. I looked up at my son, and I said nothing. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Long enough for doubt to turn into certainty. Melissa let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Wow," she said. "You're not even going to deny it." Ethan's expression hardened. "Mom, I need you to say something." I opened my mouth, closed it again, because no matter what I said, I would be breaking the one promise I had made to my husband on his deathbed, and I wasn't ready to destroy what he had tried so hard to protect. So I stayed silent, and in that moment, I watched my son lose faith in me. Sophie shifted in her chair. "Dad, maybe there's another explanation," she said softly. Melissa shot her a sharp look. "What explanation?" she snapped. "The money didn't just disappear." Ethan didn't look at Sophie. His eyes stayed on me. "Mom," he said again, quieter this time. "Please." There was something in his voice. Not just anger, not just suspicion. Fear. Like he was hoping desperately that I would give him a reason not to believe the worst. And I couldn't, because the truth would hurt him far more than this ever could. "I'm sorry," I whispered. And I meant it, just not in the way they thought. Melissa straightened as if that was all the confirmation she needed. "That's it," she said. "She took it." Ethan stepped back like I had physically struck him. "You took it," he repeated. I didn't nod. I didn't confirm. But I didn't deny it either. And sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. The room felt colder, sharper, like something invisible had just cracked between us. Melissa picked up the bank statement and folded it neatly. "We need to Protan folded it neatly. We need to prot ECT this family," she said. "If she's capable of this," I said. "I'm sorry," I interrupted, my voice shaking. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Ethan turned away from me. For the first time in his life at this family, she said, "If she's capable of this," I said. "I'm sorry," I interrupted, my voice shaking. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Ethan turned away from me. For the first time in his life, he couldn't even look at me. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "After everything, why would you do this?" I swallowed hard, because the answer to that question was the one thing I could never give him. Sophie stood up suddenly. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "Grandma wouldn't stay out of it, Sophie." Melissa cut in sharply, "But I said stay out of it." Sophie looked at me, really looked at me, and for a brief moment I saw something in her eyes that no one else in that room had. Doubt. Not in me, but in the story she was being told. And that scared me more than anything, because if Sophie started asking the right questions, she might uncover a truth that was never meant to be found. Ethan exhaled slowly, like he was trying to steady himself. "Mom," Because if Sophie started asking the right questions, she might uncover a truth that was never meant to be found. Ethan exhaled slowly like he was trying to steady himself. "Mom," he said without turning back to me. "Until we figure this out, I think it's best if you don't access any of the accounts." I nodded. I expected that. And maybe he hesitated, his voice cracking slightly. Maybe we need some space. Space. Such a gentle word for something that felt like exile. "I understand," I said. And I did, more than he could ever know. Because I had seen this coming the moment Charles made me promise. What I didn't expect was how quickly my silence would turn me into a stranger in my own family. And as I walked out of that house that day, I realized something that terrified me more than losing the money, more than losing my home. I was losing my son, and he didn't even know. I was still trying to save him. That night, I didn't sleep, not because of the accusation, not because of the money, but because of the look on Ethan's face when I walked out the door. I had seen my son angry before, frustrated, even disappointed. But I had never seen him look at me like I was someone he needed to protect himself from. That was new. And it hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. I sat in my living room long after midnight, the house too quiet, my thoughts too loud. The same question kept circling in my mind over and over again. Had I done the right thing? Because for the first time since Charles asked me to make that promise, I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I even looked. Ethan. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe he had calmed down. Maybe he had thought about it and realized something didn't add up. Maybe he was ready to listen. I answered on the first ring. "Ethan." There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice came through flat, distant. "We need to talk again." The hope I had felt just seconds earlier disappeared. "I can come over," I said quietly. "No," he replied quickly. "Well, come to you." "We." That meant Melissa. "Okay," I said. They arrived an hour later. Sophie wasn't with them. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing was the way Melissa walked into my home like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Careful, alert, as if she didn't trust anything around her. Ethan didn't sit. He stayed standing near the door like he didn't plan on staying long. Like this wasn't a visit, it was a transaction. "We spoke to the bank this morning," he said. I nodded slowly. "And?" I asked. "They confirmed the transfer." He continued. "Same details, same authorization." Melissa crossed her arms. "No sign of fraud," she added. "No external breach. This wasn't some hacker or mistake." Her eyes locked onto mine. This was intentional. I held her gaze even though every instinct in me wanted to look away. "Yes," I said softly. That single word seemed to ignite something in her. "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Mom." Why, there it was again, the question I couldn't answer. I walked slowly to the kitchen counter, resting my hands against the cool surface to steady myself. "It's complicated," I said. "No," Melissa snapped. "It's not complicated. You took money that doesn't belong to you." I turned to her. "It wasn't yours either," I said, before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air heavier than I intended. Ethan's expression changed. What does that mean? He asked. I hesitated, because I had already said too much. It means, I started then stopped, because I could feel at that line I wasn't supposed to cross. If I kept talking, I would break the promise, and everything Charles had tried to protect would unravel. I shook my head. I can't explain right now. Melissa let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course you can't. Ethan's jaw tightened. Mom, you need to understand how this looks, he said. You had access. The money is gone, and you're refusing to explain. I'm not refusing, I said quietly. I just can't. That's the same thing Melissa said coldly. No, I replied, my voice trembling. It's not. Ethan stepped closer. Then help me understand, he said. Give me something. Anything. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man he had become, at the boy I had raised. And for a split second, I almost told him everything. I almost said his name in that hospital room, almost told him what his father had done for him, almost freed myself from the weight of this silence. But then I remembered Charles's face, the fear in his eyes, the urgency in his voice. Protect him, even from himself. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry, I said again, and I hated how empty it sounded. Ethan stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. That's it, he asked. That's all you're going to say? I nodded slowly. Yes. Something in him shifted. Not anger, not confusion, something colder, resignation. Okay, he said quietly. Melissa straightened as if she had been waiting for that moment. Then we need to set some boundaries, she said. Ethan didn't argue. That hurt more than anything. We're freezing all shared accounts, he said. You won't have access anymore. I understand, I replied. And until we sort this out, he hesitated, then forced the words out. It's probably best if you don't come by the house. There it was, the thing I had been dreading. Not just distance, exclusion. I nodded again, even though my chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. Okay. Melissa glanced around my house. You should also consider how this affects Sophie, she said. We don't want her exposed to this kind of behavior. I felt something inside me snap at that. This kind of behavior, I repeated, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan moved toward the door. I'll call you when we figure out next steps, he said. Next steps. Like I was a problem to be managed, a situation to be resolved, not his mother. I followed them to the door, my legs feeling heavier with each step. Ethan, I said softly. He paused, but he didn't turn around. I love you, I whispered. For a moment, I thought he might say it back. He always had, even after argumenties, even when he was angry. But this time, Ethan, I said softly. He paused, but he didn't turn around. I love you, I whispered. For a moment, I thought he might say it back. He always had, even after arguments, even when he was angry. But this time, he just nodded and walked out. The door closed behind them with a quiet click. And just like that, the silence returned. Only this time it felt different, heavier, lonelier. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, replaying every second of that conversation in my mind. Every word I didn't say, Every truth I swallowed. Every chance I had to fix this and chose not to. Because of a promise. A promise that was starting to feel less like protection and more like a prison. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was Sophie. My heart skipped. I hesitated before answering. "Hi, sweetheart." "Grandma," she said, her voice low, almost like she didn't want anyone to hear. "I need to ask you something." I sat down slowly. "Okay." There was a pause. Then she said something that made my breath catch. "Are you protecting someone?" The room went completely still. Because out of everyone, she was the first one to see it, the first one to question the story, the first one to look past the silence and wonder what was behind it. And that terrified me, because if Sophie kept digging, she might uncover a truth that could hurt her father in ways he wasn't ready to face. And I wasn't sure if I could stop it. There are moments in life that never really leave you. They don't fade with time. They don't soften with distance. They just wait, quietly, patiently, until something brings them back sharp and clear like they happened yesterday. For me, that moment was the hospital room. It had been 6 months since Charles passed, but I could still see it perfectly. The pale blue walls, the steady hum of machines, the faint scent of antiseptic that clung to everything. And him. Lying in that bed, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Charles Whitaker had always been a strong man. Not loud, not controlling, but steady. The kind of man you leaned on without even realizing it. But that day, he looked tired. Not just physically, but like he was carrying something heavy inside him. Something he had kept hidden for far too long. "Luke." He had said, his voice rough but clear. I remember moving closer, taking his hand in mine. "I'm here," I told him. "I'm not going anywhere." He gave a small, almost sad smile. "I know," he said. "That's why I need to tell you this." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the door, as if making sure we were alone. Then he looked back at me. "There's something about the money," he said. Even then, I didn't fully understand. "What about it?" I asked gently. He took a slow breath, like the words themselves were difficult to carry. "I moved it." That caught me off guard. "Moved it where?" I asked. "To a protected account," he said. "One you'll have access to." I frowned slightly. "Why would you do that?" He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to continue. "Because of Ethan." That was the moment everything shifted. I felt it. A quiet, unsettling realization beginning to form. "What about Ethan?" I asked carefully. Charles opened his eyes again, and this time there was something in them I had never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for our son. "He made a mistake," Charles said. The words were simple, but the weight behind them wasn't. "What kind of mistake?" I pressed. Charles hesitated, and in that hesitation I understood. Not the details, but the seriousness. "It's already handled," he said quickly. "You don't need to worry about that part." But of course I did. He was my husband. Ethan was my son. "You can't just say that and expect me not to worry," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Charles, what did he do?" He tightened his grip on my hand. "Listen to me." he said more firmly now. What matters is that it's taken care of. No one is looking into it anymore. No one is asking questions. That didn't reassure me. If anything, it made everything worse. How did you take care of it? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I would never forget. I used the money. My breath caught. What money? He swallowed. The money you're going to be asked about one day. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? I whispered. Charles shifted slightly, wincing as he did. I transferred it, he said, quietly, legally, but in a way that won't be obvious. I stared at him, my mind racing. Why wouldn't it be obvious? Because if it is, he replied, then everything I did to protect Ethan could come undone. The room felt smaller, colder. What exactly are you protecting him from? I asked. Charles didn't answer directly. Instead, he said something else, something that made everything worse. From himself. The silence that followed was unbearable. I searched his face, looking for something, anything that would make this make sense. But all I saw was a man who knew he was running out of time. Luke, he said softly, I need you to promise me something. I shook my head instinctively. No, I said, not until you tell me everything. He gave a weak smile. If I tell you everything, I'm putting you in a position where you might have to choose between me and him. My chest tightened. I would never... Yes, he interrupted gently. You would. Because you love him. He was right, and we both knew it. That's why I can't tell you everything, he continued. But I can ask you to trust me. I felt tears sting my eyes. You're asking me to trust something I don't understand, I said. I know, he replied, and I'm sorry. He squeezed my hand again. But I need you to promise me this, Luke. His voice dropped barely above a whisper. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you don't tell them. He squeezed my hand again. But I need you to promise me this, Luke. His voice dropped barely above a whisper. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you don't tell them. My heart started pounding. Don't tell them what I asked. That the money wasn't stolen, he said. That it was moved. That it was used to fix something that should never have happened in the first place. I pulled my hand away slightly. Charles, this is too much, I said. If something comes up, if people start asking questions, they will, he said quietly. That stopped me. They will, I repeated. He nodded, and when they do, they're going to look at you. Why me? Because you're the one I'm leaving in charge. The realization hit me like a wave. You're setting me up to take the blame, I whispered. His expression broke. No, he said immediately. I'm asking you to protect him. At the cost of what I asked, my voice rising. My reputation, my relationship with my son. At the cost of something much worse if you don't, he replied. The room went silent again. I could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me. This could destroy everything I said. Yes, he agreed softly. Or it could save it. I stared at him, searching for certainty. But there wasn't any. Only hope. Fragile and uncertain. Please, he said. Just trust me. I closed my eyes, and in that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. I promise, I whispered. The tension left his face almost instantly. "Thank you," he said. A single tear slipped down my cheek. "I just hope that one day this makes sense." Charles didn't answer, because I don't think he was sure it ever would. 6 months later, standing in my empty living room, I finally understood what that promise really meant. It wasn't just about protecting Ethan. It was about losing him to protect him. And as Sophie's question echoed in my mind, "Are you protecting someone?" I realized something else. The truth wasn't just dangerous because of what it revealed. It was dangerous because of what it could destroy. And if Sophie got too close to it, I might have to choose all over again. The house had never felt so unfamiliar, not because anything had changed. The same couch sat in the same corner. The same framed photos lined the walls, family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, where everyone looked happy whole. But now those pictures felt like they belonged to someone else. Someone whose life hadn't just quietly fallen apart. I spent the next few days in a kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Every room echoed with absence Ethan's voice, Sophie's laughter, even Melissa's sharp tone. Strange how you can miss even the things that once made you uncomfortable. I didn't call. I didn't go over. Because I had been told not to. And because I knew if I pushed, it would only make things worse. On the third day, I opened my bank app. Not because I expected anything to change, but because part of me needed to see it again. The account was exactly as Ethan said. Frozen. Restricted. My name still there, but stripped of control. It was a quiet kind of humiliation. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. I set my phone down and stared at the kitchen table. Charles used to sit there every morning reading the paper, pretending not to notice when I added too much sugar to my coffee. "You'll regret that someday," he would say, and I'd always smile and answer, "Not today." Now sitting there alone, I realized regret doesn't always come from what you do. Sometimes it comes from what you don't say. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I froze for a moment. A small, hopeful part of me thought Ethan. But when I opened it, it wasn't him. It was Jonathan Reeves. He stood there in his usual dark suit, briefcase in hand, his expression as composed as ever. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said with a slight nod. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. "Of course." He walked in slowly, taking in the room with a careful glance like he was measuring something invisible. "I assume you've spoken with your son," he said as he set his briefcase down. "Yes," I replied quietly, and I let out a small breath. "He believes I took the money." Reeves nodded as if he had expected that answer. "And you didn't correct him? It wasn't a question?" "No," I said. He studied me for a moment. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "You're holding up better than most would." I gave a faint, humorless smile. "I don't feel like I am." He sat down across from me at the table. "Feelings and actions are rarely aligned in situations like this," he said. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. "How bad is it?" I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. "You mean legally?" he asked. I nodded. He folded his hands. "If your son decides to pursue this formally, it could become complicated." "Complicated how?" "There are records," he said. "Transfers, authorizations. Your name attached to all of it." I swallowed. "So it looks like I did it." "Yes." "And if it goes further?" He hesitated. "You could be investigated." The word landed harder than I expected. "Investigated? Like I was a criminal. Like everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed could be reduced to numbers on a screen. And if I tell the truth? I asked. Reeves' expression changed slightly. Not surprise, not confusion, something closer to concern. That depends, he said carefully. Which version of the truth you mean? I looked at him. You know exactly what I mean. He held my gaze. Yes, he said. I do. The silence between us stretched. You told me before, I said slowly, that breaking the promise could have consequences. It could, he confirmed. What kind of consequences? He leaned forward slightly. Your husband didn't just move money, he said. He resolved a situation. I know that much. What you don't know, he continued, is how fragile that resolution is. I felt a chill run through me. Explain. Reeves paused, choosing his words carefully. The issue involving your son was never officially documented, he said. It was handled privately. Meaning if certain details resurface, he said they could raise questions. Questions that might lead to scrutiny. Scrutiny that could reopen matters that were effectively buried. My heart started to race. So, if I talk, you risk exposing him. I closed my eyes for a moment. That was it. The line. The one Charles had drawn. The one I had promised not to cross. And if I don't? I asked. Reeves didn't hesitate. You risk losing your family. I let out a slow breath. So those were the choices. Protect my son or keep him. And the cruelest part, he didn't even know he was being protected. Reeves reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. There's something else, he said. I looked at it. What is that? Documents your husband left with me, he replied. Instructions mostly. Contingencies. Contingencies. There's something else, he said. I looked at it. What is that? Documents your husband left with me, he replied. Instructions mostly. Contingencies. Contingencies. In case things unfolded like this. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the folder. Can I see it? He placed a hand on top of it, stopping me. Not yet. I frowned. Why not? Because once you read this, he said, his voice steady, you'll understand everything. A strange sense of dread settled in my chest. And that's a problem. It could be, he said, because understanding might make it harder for you to stay silent. I pulled my hand back. So you're saying ignorance is helping me keep my promise? In a way, he said. I leaned back again, my mind spinning. Everything felt like it was balancing on something fragile. One wrong move and it would all collapse. Ethan's already slipping, I said quietly. I can see it. Reeves didn't respond. He's angry, I continued. But underneath that, he's scared, and I'm the one he's pushing away. That's often how people react when they don't understand what's happening, Reeves said. I shook my head. No, I said. This is different. He raised an eyebrow slightly. How so? I hesitated. Then I said something I hadn't admitted out loud until that moment. I think Melissa is making it worse. Reeves didn't look surprised. In what way? She's guiding him, I said. Every thought, every conclusion. It's like she wants him to believe I did this. Reeves leaned back, considering that. That's not uncommon either, he said carefully. I frowned. What does that mean? It means he replied that when there's uncertainty, people tend to align with the person who offers clarity, even if that clarity is wrong, especially then. I sat in silence, letting that sink in. Because if that was true, then Ethan wasn't just losing trust in me. He was replacing it with something else, someone else. And that scared me more than anything. Reeves stood up, closing his briefcase. "I won't stay long," he said, "but I needed to make sure you understood what's at stake." "I do," I said softly. He paused at the door. "Mrs. Whitaker," he added, "your husband believed this was the only way." I looked at him. "And do you—" He hesitated. Then he gave a small, honest answer. "I believe it was the safest way." The door closed behind him, and I was left alone again. Only now, the silence didn't just feel heavy. It felt dangerous, because somewhere out there, the truth was starting to move, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it contained. I thought the worst part of losing my family would be the silence. But I was wrong. The worst part was waiting for something to happen, for Ethan to call, for Melissa to escalate things, for Sophie to ask more questions, for the truth to surface in a way I couldn't control. Every passing day felt like a countdown I couldn't see. And then 4 days after Jonathan Reeves left my house, everything shifted again. It started with a message. Not from Ethan, not from Melissa, from Sophie. "Can I come see you alone?" I stared at the words for a long time. My first instinct was to say no, to protect her, to keep her away from something that could unravel more than she understood. But something inside me, something softer, something that remembered who she was before all of this wouldn't let me. "Yes," I replied, "anytime." She showed up an hour later. No car, no announcement, just a quiet knock on the door. When I opened it, she stood there with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression serious, in a way that didn't belong on a 16-year-old's face. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked past me slower than usual, like she was stepping into something uncertain. "I told Dad I was going to a friend's house," she said as she set her bag down. That made my chest tighten. "You didn't have to lie," I said gently. She shrugged. "It was easier." I nodded. I understood that more than I wanted to. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Charles used to read the paper, the same table where everything used to feel normal. Sophie didn't waste time. She looked straight at me and said, "You didn't take the money. It wasn't a question. It was a statement." I felt my throat tighten. "Sophie." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I've been thinking about it. None of this makes sense." I stayed quiet. She leaned forward slightly. "You didn't even try to defend yourself," she continued. "That's not how guilty people act. They panic. They explain. They lie." Her eyes searched mine. "You didn't do any of that." I forced a small smile. "You're very observant." "I'm serious," she said. "Something else is going on." There it was again. That instinct. That quiet ability to see past what was obvious. It reminded me of Charles, and that made this even harder. "Sophie," I said carefully, "some things are more complicated than they look." "Then explain them to me," she said. Her voice wasn't demanding, it was pleading, and that made it worse. Because I wanted to. More than anything, I wanted to tell her the truth. to clear my name, to stop being the person everyone thought I was. But the moment I opened that door, there would be no closing it. I can't, I said softly. She sat back, frustration flickering across her face. Why not? I hesitated. Because this was the moment where I had to decide how much to say without saying too much. Because it doesn't just affect me, I said finally. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So, you are protecting someone? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence did it for me. Sophie exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair. I knew it, she muttered. I closed my eyes briefly. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. You need to stop, I said gently. Stop what? Looking into this, I replied, asking questions. Why, she asked, her voice rising slightly. Because I might find something. Yes, I said. The word came out sharper than I intended. Sophie blinked. Why is that a bad thing? Because the truth might break your father. Because it might undo everything your grandfather sacrificed. Because it might change how you see your own family forever. But I couldn't say any of that. Because not all truths are meant to be uncovered, I said instead. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. That doesn't sound like you, she said. I know. But it sounds like someone who's scared. I swallowed. Maybe I am. She leaned forward again. Then let me help you, she said. That broke something inside me, because she meant it, every word. She wasn't trying to expose me. She was trying to save me, just like I was trying to save her father. And somehow, we had ended up on opposite sides of the same truth. You can't help me, I said quietly. Why not? Because this isn't your responsibility. Maybe it should be, she shot back. No, I said firmly. It shouldn't. The room fell silent. Sophie looked down at the table, tracing a small scratch in the wood with her finger. When Dad talks about you now, she said slowly, he sounds different. My chest tightened. How? Like he's trying to convince himself, she said. I looked at her. What do you mean? He keeps repeating the same things, she explained. The facts are clear. There's no other explanation. She didn't deny it. She paused. But he says it like if he stops saying it, he might stop believing it. That hit harder than anything else, because it meant Ethan wasn't as certain as he was pretending to be. He was holding on to the idea of my guilt, because the alternative was too painful. Melissa doesn't talk like that, Sophie added. I felt a chill. How does she talk? Like she's already decided, Sophie said. Like she doesn't want to hear anything else? I nodded slowly. That made sense. Too much sense, Grandma Sophie said softly. If there's something that could change all of this, you have to tell him. I looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, at the belief she still had in me, and I felt something inside me crack. I can't, I whispered. Her expression fell. Why not? She asked again. Because it would hurt him more than this, I said. She shook her head. That doesn't make sense. I know, I said, but it's true. She stood up suddenly, pacing a few steps before turning back to me. So what? She said. You're just going to let him hate you if that's what it takes to protect him. Yes, I said. The word hung in the air between us, heavy, final. Sophie stared at me, her eyes filling with something I hadn't seen before. Not confusion, not frustration, something deeper, something closer to heartbreak. I don't think I could do that, she said quietly. I gave a sad smile. I hope you never have to. She grabbed her backpack, slinging it over her shoulder. I'm not done with this, she said. My heart sank. Sophie. I won't tell Dad I came here, she interrupted. But I'm not going to pretend this makes sense. I stood up slowly. You need to let this go, I said. She shook her head. No, she said. You're asking me to ignore something that feels wrong. She moved toward the door, then stopped. And you always told me, she added, her voice softer now, that when something feels wrong, it usually is. I closed my eyes. Because she was right. She opened the door. Just be careful, I said. She looked back at me one last time. You too, Grandma. And then she was gone. I stood there in the doorway long after she left. Because I knew something now. Something I hadn't fully admitted before. The truth wasn't just slipping. It was being pulled. And Sophie, whether she realized it or not, was already following the thread. And if she kept going, she might uncover something that even Charles hadn't planned for. Something that could change everything. I didn't hear from Ethan for 3 days after Sophie came to see me. Not a call, not a message, not even the short distant check-ins he used to send when things were tense. That silence felt intentional. Like he was creating space, not just because he needed it, but because someone had told him he should. And I knew exactly who that someone was. On the 4th morning, I woke up with a feeling I couldn't shake. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something quieter. A sense that something had already begun, and I was just waiting to catch up to it. I made coffee, though I didn't really want it, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. I stared at it longer than I'd like to admit. Waiting. For what? I wasn't even sure. And then it rang. Ethan. My breath caught. For a brief, fragile moment, hope returned. I answered immediately. Ethan. There was no greeting, no pause. We need to meet, he said. His voice was different, not just cold, resolved. Something inside me tightened. Okay, I said carefully. We're Reeves' office, he replied. That surprised me. With Jonathan? Yes. I hesitated. Why? There was a brief silence. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Because this isn't just a family conversation anymore. The line went quiet after that, and I understood. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be something I could hold together with silence. Jonathan Reeves' office had always felt calm, controlled. A place where things were handled quietly, professionally. But that day, it felt like a courtroom. Ethan was already there when I arrived. Melissa stood beside him, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. And Reeves sat behind his desk, hands folded, watching all of us with that same measured calm. Mrs. Whitaker, he said as I stepped in. Please have a seat. I did, across from Ethan. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. He had already made up his mind. Let's not waste time, Melissa said, breaking the silence. We've spoken to an advisor. Of course they had. And I asked. Ethan took a breath. If the money isn't returned or properly accounted for, this could escalate. I nodded slowly. I understand. Melissa leaned forward slightly. No, she said. I don't think you do. Her tone was sharp, deliberate. This isn't just about trust anymore. This is about liability. Ethan didn't stop her. That hurt more than her words ever could. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said quietly. Then explain it, she replied immediately. I can't. There it was again, that same answer, that same wall. And this time, it landed differently. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine, too. "Mom," he said, his voice low but steady, "if you don't explain this, I don't know how to defend you." That word defend cut deeper than anything else, because it meant he still wanted to. At least part of him did. "You don't need to defend me," I said softly. "Yes, I do," he snapped. "You're my mother." The room went quiet. Even Melissa didn't interrupt. "I want to believe you," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "But you're not giving me anything to hold on to." My chest tightened, because I could feel it, that last thread between us. Straining. "Ethan," I started. But the words didn't come, because what could I say? That I loved him enough to let him hate me, that his father had sacrificed everything to protect him, that the truth would break something inside him he might never recover from. None of those things would help. Not right now. "I'm sorry," I said again. And this time, I saw it. That was the moment something inside him gave up. Not completely, but enough. He leaned back, shaking his head slowly. "I can't keep doing this," he said. Melissa placed a hand on his arm. "We don't have to," she said softly. Reeves cleared his throat. "If I may," he said, drawing everyone's attention. "This situation can still be resolved without further damage." Melissa turned to him. "How?" Reeves opened a folder on his desk. "There are provisions," he said, "that allow for clarification of financial movement without full disclosure of intent." I frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," he explained, "that under certain conditions, the transfer can be explained in a way that satisfies legal scrutiny without revealing underlying motivations." Melissa narrowed her eyes. "That sounds like a loophole." "It's a protective measure," Reeves replied calmly. "For who she pressed." He looked at me. "For everyone involved." I felt my heart start to race, because I knew what he was offering, a way to contain the truth, without exposing it, but at a cost. "There are limitations," Reeves continued, "and it requires agreement from all parties." Ethan leaned forward again. "What kind of limitations?" Reeves paused. "Once this path is taken, the matter is considered closed. No further inquiry, no reopening of details." Melissa frowned. "That doesn't sound right." "It's legal," Reeves said, "and final." Ethan looked at me. "This is your chance," he said. "Whatever this is, just take it." I hesitated, because I understood what this meant. It meant the truth would never come out. Not to Ethan, not to Sophie, not to anyone. Charles's secret would stay buried. Forever. But so would the misunderstanding, the damage, the distance. "Mom," Ethan said, again softer now. "Please." I looked at him, at the hope still lingering in his eyes, at the part of him that hadn't fully let go yet, and I realized something in that moment. This wasn't just about protecting him anymore. It was about what kind of future we could still have. A future built on silence, or one shattered by truth. Reeves watched me carefully. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. But we all knew. I did. Because every second I stayed silent, the distance between us grew. And every step forward, without the truth, was a step further away from ever being understood. Melissa crossed her arms. "Well," she said. The room held its breath, and for the first time since I made that promise, I felt something shift inside me. Not enough to break it, but enough to question it. Because maybe, just maybe, there was another way. I need time, I said finally. Melissa exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Okay, he said quietly, but I could hear it in his voice. That thread between us was almost gone. And if I didn't find a way to hold on to it soon, there might be nothing left to save. The meeting at Reeves' office didn't end with shouting. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic exits, just something quieter, more dangerous. A decision that had already been made without me. Ethan didn't call after that. He didn't text, and somehow that silence felt different from before. It wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't hesitation. It was distance, deliberate, final. 2 days later, I found out why. It was Melissa who told me. Not directly, of course. She never did anything directly. She sent an email, short, formal, cold. Luke, moving forward, we think it's best if you no longer come by the house unannounced. Sophie needs stability right now, and this situation has already caused enough disruption. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I was trying to convince myself I had misunderstood. Unannounced. As if I had ever needed permission before. As if I were a guest. As if I weren't family. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down. This was it. Not just distance, exclusion. A boundary that wasn't meant to be temporary. A line that had been drawn, and not by Ethan, but enforced through him. I didn't reply. Because what could I say? That I agreed, that I didn't, that I was sorry. None of it would change anything. Later that afternoon, I drove past their house. I told myself I wasn't going to stop, that I just needed to see it, to remind myself it was still there, still mine in some way. But when I turned the corner and saw it, the porch, the windows, the same wind chimes I had hung years ago, I slowed down, then stopped. I sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the place that used to feel like home. And that's when I saw her. Sophie. She was sitting on the front steps, her phone in her hand, her head down, waiting. For a second, I thought about driving away, pretending I hadn't seen her, following the rules that had just been handed to me. But then she looked up, and our eyes met. She stood up immediately, and I knew. She had been hoping I would come. I opened the car door. "Grandma," she said as she walked toward me. Her voice carried something I hadn't heard in days, relief. "I didn't know if you would actually come," she added. "I wasn't planning to," I admitted softly. She gave a small, knowing nod. "But you did." "Yes," I said. "I did." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then she glanced back at the house. "They're not home," she said quietly. "They won't be back for another hour." I felt a familiar tension rise in my chest. This wasn't just a visit. It was something else, something she had planned. "Sophie," I started. "I found something," she said. The words hit like a sudden drop. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document. "I wasn't trying to snoop," she said quickly. "I was just looking for something else." I didn't ask what, because I already knew. She handed me the paper. My fingers felt cold as I took it. I unfolded it slowly, and the moment I saw the header, my heart stopped. It was a financial statement, not recent, older, from before Charles died. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the name, Ethan Whitaker, and beneath it, a series of transactions, large ones, irregular ones, the kind that raised questions, the kind Charles had been talking about. I closed my eyes for a moment. Too soon. This was happening too soon. How long have you had this? I asked quietly. Since yesterday, Sophie said. And you didn't show your dad? She shook her head. No. Why not? Because I didn't understand it, she said. And I knew if I showed him, he'd just react. She wasn't wrong. And now, I asked. She looked at me carefully. I think it's connected. My chest tightened. Sophie, don't, she interrupted gently. Please don't tell me to stop. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because I knew that wouldn't work anymore. You said the truth would hurt him more? She continued. This is part of that truth, isn't it? I looked down at the paper in my hands, at the past that had stayed buried for so long, at the promise I had made to keep it that way. Yes, I whispered. She exhaled slowly like she had been holding that question in for days. I knew it, she said. There was no satisfaction in her voice, no sense of being right, just sadness. Does he know? She asked. No. Did Grandpa fix this? I hesitated, but this time I nodded. Sophie closed her eyes briefly. Then why are you the one being blamed? Because I chose it, because I promised, because some truths are meant to stay hidden. But none of those answers felt enough. Because it was the only way, I said. She shook her head. No, she said. There has to be another way. I looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the part of her that refused to accept things as they were. And for the first time, I wasn't sure she was wrong. What are you thinking? I asked. She hesitated, then said something that made my heart race. I think Dad deserves to know, she said. The words hung between us, heavy, dangerous. No, I said immediately. Her expression tightened. Why not? She hesitated, then said something that made my heart race. I think Dad deserves to know, she said. The words hung between us, heavy, dangerous. No, I said immediately. Her expression tightened. Why not? Because it won't just explain things, I said. It will reopen them. What does that mean? It means, I continued carefully, that what your grandfather fixed might not stay fixed. She frowned. But it's already affecting him now, she argued. He's pushing you away. He's angry. He's confused. I know. Then how is this better? I didn't have an answer. Not one that felt strong enough to hold everything together. I made a promise, I said finally. She stepped closer. And what if that promise is hurting more than it's protecting? That question hit harder than anything else. Because it was the one I had been avoiding, the one I didn't want to ask myself. What if keeping this secret is actually making things worse? I looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The truth wasn't just buried anymore. It was breaking through. Slowly, inevitably. And Sophie was already standing in the middle of it. I don't know, I admitted. She nodded. Then maybe it's time to find out. The wind chimes behind us moved softly in the breeze, a sound I used to associate with comfort. Now it felt like a warning, because I could feel it. That fragile balance Charles had created was starting to collapse. And if we didn't choose carefully, we might not just lose the truth. We might lose everything it was meant to protect. After that afternoon with Sophie, I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly through streets I had known for decades but barely recognized anymore. Every stoplight felt longer than it should have been. Every turn felt uncertain, because for the first time since Charles made me promise, I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing anymore. Sophie's words kept echoing in my mind. What if keeping this secret is actually making things worse? I had spent months believing that silence was protection. That if I just held the line, everything would eventually settle. That Ethan would calm down. That the truth would stay buried where it belonged. But now the truth wasn't buried. It was moving, and I could feel it slipping through my fingers. That evening, I finally returned home. The house felt even quieter than before. But this time, it wasn't just loneliness. It was tension. Like something unseen had already entered and was waiting. I set my keys down and walked into the living room. And that's when I noticed it. The folder, sitting neatly on the coffee table. My breath caught. I knew immediately where it had come from. Jonathan Reeves. I hadn't heard him come in, hadn't received a call. But there it was. The same folder he had refused to show me before. Now left in plain sight. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding. This was it. The truth. Not pieces of it. Not fragments. Everything. I hesitated, because I remembered what he said. Once you read this, you'll understand everything. And once I understood, I might not be able to stay silent anymore. My fingers hovered over the edge of the folder. Then slowly, I opened it. Inside were documents, statements, notes written in Charles's handwriting. And as I began to read, the past unfolded in front of me in a way I hadn't been prepared for. It was worse than I thought. Not because of what Ethan had done, but because of how close it had come to destroying him. Years ago, before Sophie was born, before Melissa entered his life, Ethan had made a decision. A desperate one. An investment. High risk. Unregulated. The kind that promises everything and hides the cost. At first it worked. Small gains, quick returns, enough to convince him to go further. Then bigger risks, bigger money, until one day it collapsed. Not just financially, legally. There had been irregularities, misreported transactions, things that if examined closely would raise serious questions, questions that could lead to charges. To consequences Ethan wasn't ready to face. Charles had found out. Not from Ethan, but from someone else. A quiet warning, a chance to fix things before they spiraled, and he had acted, fast, decisively. He had used the money, transferred it, covered losses, closed accounts, silenced the problem before it could grow. Legally enough to pass scrutiny, but carefully enough to leave no obvious trail, except one. The transfer. The one in my name. The one that now made me look guilty. I turned the page, my hands shaking. There was a letter, written by Charles, addressed to me. Luke, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped. I wanted to believe that what I did would stay buried, that Ethan would move forward and never look back, that you would never have to carry this. But if you are, then I'm sorry. My vision blurred slightly as I continued. I made a choice. Not because it was right, but because it was necessary. Ethan made a mistake that could have followed him for the rest of his life. Not just financially, but legally. I couldn't let that happen, so I fixed it, and I left you with the burden of keeping it fixed. I swallowed hard, because now I finally understood the weight he had given me. You may lose his trust. The letter continued. You may lose your place in this family, but if you tell the truth, you risk losing him entirely. And I couldn't ask you to make that choice without knowing what was at stake. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I read the final lines. So I made it for you. I chose to protect him, and now I'm asking you to do the same. I closed the folder slowly. The room felt smaller, heavier, because now there was no more uncertainty, no more guessing, no more maybe, just the truth, clear, unavoidable, and devastating. My phone rang. I jumped slightly, my heart still racing. Ethan, of course. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello, Mom, he said, his voice tense. We need to talk again. Something in his tone had changed. Not anger, not distance, something else. What happened? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said, I found something. My breath caught. What kind of something? Old records, he replied, from before Dad passed. My heart started pounding. Sophie, she must have shown him. How much did you see? I asked carefully. Enough to know that something doesn't add up, he said. There it was, the moment I had been trying to delay. Now it had arrived on its own. I'm coming over, he said. No, I replied immediately. The words surprised both of us. Why not? He asked. Because, I hesitated, looking down at the folder in my hands. Because if he came here, everything would change. Because we need to talk somewhere neutral, I said. There was a pause. Then, Reeves' office, he said. Again, everything was circling back to the same place. Okay, I whispered. Well, be there in an hour, he said. We? Of course. Melissa would be there, always there, guiding, watching, shaping the outcome. The line went dead, and I sat there in silence, the folder still open in front of me. For months, I had held the truth back, believing it was the only way to protect him. But now, the truth was already finding its way out, piece by piece. Through Sophie, through the records, through the cracks I could no longer seal. And I realized something I had been too afraid to admit before. The choice was no longer between silence and truth. That choice had already been taken from me. Now, it was about how much damage the truth would do when it finally surfaced, and whether I would be the one to tell it or the one who let it destroy everything on its own. The drive back to Jonathan Reeves' office felt shorter this time, not because the distance had changed, but because something inside me had. For months, I had been reacting, holding back, protecting, delaying, but now I knew, and knowing changes everything. It doesn't make decisions easier. It just makes them unavoidable. When I arrived, Ethan and Melissa were already there again, just like before, waiting. But this time, something was different. Ethan didn't look angry. He looked unsettled, like someone who had started pulling at a thread and realized it might unravel more than he expected. Melissa, on the other hand, looked sharper than ever. Focused, prepared, controlled. And that told me everything I needed to know. She didn't want this to be complicated. She wanted it resolved, quickly, cleanly. in a way that confirmed what she already believed. Reeves gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded, taking my place across from them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. "I found records," he said. His voice wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't soft either. "Just thank you for coming," he said. I nodded, taking my place across from them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. "I found records," he said. His voice wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't soft either, just steady. "I know," I replied. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You know," I nodded. "I saw them too." Melissa leaned forward immediately. "So you admit there's more to this?" she said. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Ethan. "Yes," I said. That single word changed the room. You could feel it. The shift. The opening. Ethan leaned forward. "Then explain it," he said. There it was, the moment, the one I had been avoiding, the one Charles had tried to prevent, the one Sophie had pushed toward. And now, it was here. I took a slow breath. Before I say anything, I said carefully, "You need to understand something." Ethan frowned slightly. "What?" "This isn't just about money," I said. "And it's not just about me." Melissa exhaled sharply. "Of course it isn't," she said. "It's about accountability." "No," I replied, finally turning to her. "It's about consequences." She didn't like that. I could see it in the way her posture stiffened. But Ethan didn't interrupt. He was watching me, listening, really listening, and that mattered. "What kind of consequences?" he asked. I hesitated, because once I said it, there was no taking it back. "It involves you," I said. The room went still. Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" I felt my heart start to race. "Years ago, I said slowly before Sophie was born, you made an investment." His expression changed immediately. Confusion, recognition, and then unease. "I've made a lot of investments," he said. "Not like this one," I replied. Silence. Melissa looked between us. "What is she talking about?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer. Because he was starting to remember. "You didn't tell me," she pressed. Still nothing. I leaned forward slightly. "It went wrong," I continued. "Not just financially." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stop," he said quietly. "I didn't." "You lost more than money," I said. "You crossed into something riskier." "Mom," he said louder now. But it wasn't anger. It was fear, and that told me I was right. "You didn't know how to fix it," I said. "And before it could get worse, your father found out." Melissa turned sharply toward Ethan. "What is she talking about?" He still didn't answer, because now he couldn't. "Charles stepped in," I said. "He used the money." I gestured slightly toward Reeves's desk. "The money you think I took." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "That's not—" "It is," I said gently. Melissa stood up. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're trying to shift blame. I'm not shifting anything." I interrupted. "I'm telling you what happened." Ethan looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see it happening, piece by piece. The memory, the realization, the connection. "What did he do?" Ethan asked quietly. I swallowed. "He fixed it," I said, "before anyone else could see it. Piece by piece. The memory, The realization, the connection. What did he do? Ethan asked quietly. I swallowed. He fixed it, I said, before anyone else could see it. Melissa laughed sharp and disbelieving. So now your story is that his father committed financial manipulation to cover up what exactly Ethan didn't laugh. Because he knew, or at least he was starting to. What exactly, she repeated, turning to him. He finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to go that far, he said. Her expression froze. What? He didn't look at her. He looked at the table, at nothing. I thought I could handle it, he continued. It was just temporary. I was going to fix it. It wasn't supposed to go that far, he said. Her expression froze. What? He didn't look at her. He looked at the table, at nothing. I thought I could handle it, he continued. It was just temporary. I was going to fix it. His voice was quieter now, more distant. But it got bigger, he admitted, and I didn't know how to stop it. Melissa stared at him. You never told me this, she said. He didn't respond, because now he couldn't hide from it anymore. Your father handled it, I said softly. He made sure it didn't come back to you. Ethan looked up at me. By putting it in your name? Yes. His expression shifted, from confusion to something deeper, something heavier. So you've been taking the blame for something I did? He asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was already there. Melissa stepped back, shaking her head, shaking. This doesn't make any sense, she said. If this were true, why wouldn't you just say it from the beginning? Because it wasn't my story to tell, I replied. It affects him, I added, looking at Ethan. And if it had come out the wrong way, it could have reopened everything. Melissa scoffed. Or maybe it's just convenient, she said. Reeves finally spoke. It's not convenient, he said calmly. Both of them turned to him. What? Melissa asked. He opened the folder in front of him. The records support what Mrs. Whitaker is saying, he said. Melissa's face went pale, and if this had been investigated formally at the time, he continued, there would have been serious implications. Ethan's shoulders dropped slightly, like something inside him had finally given way. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. The question wasn't angry. It was broken. I felt my chest tighten. Because your father asked me not to, I said, and you chose him over me. No, I said softly. I chose to protect you. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was heavy, full of everything that had been left unsaid for too long. Ethan sat back slowly, his eyes distant. I thought you... He started, then stopped. I waited. I thought you just didn't care enough to explain. He finished. That hurt, but not in the way it would have before. Because now, he understood, at least part of it. I cared enough to stay silent, I said. He looked at me again. And this time, there was no anger. Just something fragile, something uncertain, something that might still be saved. Melissa, however, wasn't finished. This isn't over, she said sharply. There are still questions. Of course there were. There always would be, because the truth doesn't clean things up. It just replaces one kind of damage with another. But as I looked at Ethan, I realized something. The silence had protected him, but the truth might be the only thing that could bring him back. No one moved for a long time after the truth came out. Not completely, not cleanly, just enough to break the illusion that had been holding everything together. Ethan sat there, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze unfocused. Melissa stood a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly like she was trying to hold something in place that no longer fit. And Jonathan Reeves, he simply watched, like he had seen this moment coming long before any of us had. I didn't speak, because there was nothing left to reveal, only things left to feel. And sometimes that's harder. Ethan was the first to move. He stood slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I need a minute," he said. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. No one stopped him. He walked toward the window, staring out at nothing in particular. And for the first time since this began, he looked like a man who didn't have answers. Melissa turned to me sharply. "You expect us to just believe this?" she said. I met her gaze calmly. "You don't have to believe anything," I replied. "The records are there. That doesn't prove intent," she shot back. "No," I said. "It proves truth." She scoffed. "That's not the same thing." Reeves spoke again, his tone even. "In this case, he said it is." Melissa turned to him. "You're telling me that a man committed financial manipulation to cover up his son's mistake, and we're supposed to accept that as justification?" "No," Reeves said. "You're supposed to understand it as context." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because there was nothing clean about this. No clear villain, no simple explanation. Just choices and consequences. Ethan turned back toward us. His face looked different now. Not just tired, older, like he had just stepped into a version of himself he didn't recognize. "Why didn't he tell me?" he asked. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but I answered. "Because he didn't want you to carry it," I said. Ethan shook his head slowly. "But now I am," he replied. There was no anger in his voice, just wait. And I realized something then. The truth hadn't freed him. It had just shifted the burden from me to him. Melissa stepped closer to him. "Ethan," she said carefully, "this doesn't change everything." He looked at her. "It changes enough," he replied. Her expression tightened. "No," she said. "It explains some things, but it doesn't excuse others." "What others?" he asked. "The fact that your mother let you believe she stole from you?" she said. "The fact that she watched you question her and said nothing." That landed hard. Because it was true. Ethan looked at me again, and this time there was something new in his eyes. Not anger, not confusion, something deeper, something more complicated. "Why didn't you trust me with it?" he asked. That question hurt more than any accusation, because it wasn't about blame, it was about distance. "I did trust you," I said softly. "Then why keep it from me?" he pressed. "Because trust isn't always about telling someone everything," I said. "Sometimes it's about protecting them from what they're not ready to carry." He frowned slightly. "I'm not a child," he said. "I know," I replied. "But you were when this happened." Silence. "You made a mistake," I continued gently. "A serious one. Your father made a decision to fix it before it could define your future." "And you agreed with that?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "I agreed with protecting you," I said. He let out a slow breath. "And what about now?" he asked. Was I still someone who needed protecting? That question I didn't have a clean answer for. "Maybe not," I admitted. "Then why keep going?" he asked. "Because promises don't always change just because circumstances do," I said. He shook his head. "That doesn't make sense." "No," I said quietly, "it doesn't." And that was the truth. The hardest part of all of this wasn't the secret. It was that the reason behind it didn't fit neatly into logic. It was emotional, complicated, human. And those kinds of truths are the hardest to accept. Sophie's name came to my mind suddenly. "She knows," I said. Ethan looked at me sharply. "What?" "She found part of it," I explained, before I said anything. His expression shifted again. "How much does she know enough to ask questions?" I said. Melissa immediately reacted. "She shouldn't be involved in this," she said. "She already is," I replied. "That's exactly the problem," she snapped. Ethan held up a hand, stopping her. "I'll talk to her," he said. His voice had changed again. Not as uncertain, not as reactive, more grounded. Like he was starting to take ownership of something. And that was something I hadn't seen in a long time. Reeves stood up slowly. "I believe we've reached a point of clarity," he said. Melissa crossed her arms again. "This isn't over," she repeated. No, Reeves agreed, "but it's different now." He looked at Ethan. "You have the full picture," he said. "What you do with it is your decision." Ethan nodded slowly. I could see the weight of that settling on him. Because for the first time since this began, the choice wasn't mine anymore. It was his. We left the office together. Not side by side, but not completely apart either. There was space between us, but it wasn't the same kind of distance as before. This time, it felt like something that could still be crossed. Ethan stopped near the car. "I need time," he said. I nodded. "I understand." He hesitated, then asked something I hadn't expected. "Do you regret it?" The question caught me off guard. "Regret what?" I asked. "Keeping it from me," he said. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the silence, the distance, the pain it had caused, and the damage it had prevented. "Yes," I said, finally. He looked surprised. "But I don't regret." He looked surprised. "But I don't regret why I did it," I added. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I don't know how to feel about any of this yet," he admitted. "You don't have to," I said. "Not right away." He exhaled. "Everything I thought was true, why I did it," I added. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I don't know how to feel about any of this yet," he admitted. "You don't have to," I said. "Not right away." He exhaled. "Everything I thought was true," he said quietly, "isn't." I stepped closer. "Not everything I said," gently. He looked at me. "You didn't betray me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. And hearing it felt like something inside me finally loosened. "No," I said softly. "I didn't." He nodded again, and for the first time since all of this began, there was something in his expression that felt familiar. Not complete, not resolved, but closer. And sometimes closer is enough to begin again. The days after the truth came out were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, not resolved, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something breaks, not because it's healed, but because everyone is trying to understand what's left. Ethan didn't call me, but he didn't shut me out either. And somehow that middle ground felt more fragile than distance, because now everything depended on what came next. It was Sophie who came first. Again. 3 days after the meeting, I heard the knock on my door just after noon. I already knew it was her. Somehow, I always did. When I opened the door, She stood there with that same serious expression. But this time, there was something softer beneath it. Less urgency. More. Somehow, I always did. When I opened the door, she stood there with that same serious expression. But this time, there was something softer beneath it. Less urgency. More understanding. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, looking around the house like she was seeing it differently. Not just as a place, but as part of a story she had only just begun to understand. "I talked to Dad," she said. I nodded. "I figured you would." She sat down at the kitchen table, resting her hands in front of her. "He told me everything," she added. My chest tightened slightly. "Everything?" She nodded. "At least everything he knows." That was fair. Because even now, there were parts of this that no one fully understood. Not even me. "What did you think?" I asked gently. She looked down for a moment, then back up. "I think it's complicated," she said. I smiled faintly. "That's a good word for it." She leaned forward slightly. "But I also think you didn't deserve what happened." That caught me off guard. "Sophie." "No," she said softly. "I mean it. I was mad at you at first. I thought you were hiding something because you did something wrong." I nodded. That makes sense. But now she continued, her voice quieter. "I think you were hiding something because you loved him. The simplicity of that, the clarity of it. It hit deeper than anything else." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly why." She studied my face. "Was it worth it?" she asked. The question lingered. Not accusatory, not judgmental, just honest. And I realized something. No one had asked me that before. Not Ethan, not Melissa, not even myself. Was it worth it? I thought about the months of silence, the distance, the way Ethan had looked at me, the way I had let him. And then I thought about something else. What could have happened? What might have been uncovered? What might have followed him for the rest of his life? "Yes," I said quietly. Sophie nodded slowly. "Then I think Grandpa was right," she said. "That surprised me." "You do?" She smiled faintly. "Not completely," she added, "but I think he did what he thought was best." "That's all any of us can do," I said. She looked around again, her gaze lingering on the old photographs on the wall. "Dad's been different," she said after a moment. "How so?" "He's quieter," she replied. "Not angry, just thinking." I nodded. "That's good." "Is it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It means he hasn't shut it out." She considered that. "Mom hasn't changed. He's quieter," she replied. "Not angry, just thinking." I nodded. "That's good." "Is it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It means he hasn't shut it out." She considered that. "Mom hasn't changed," she added. I sighed softly. I didn't expect her to. Sophie hesitated. "I think she still believes you did something wrong," she said. "That's okay," I replied. "No, it's not," Sophie said firmly. I looked at her. "It doesn't feel okay," she continued, "when someone refuses to see what's right in front of them." I smiled gently. "Sometimes people don't see things because they're not ready to," I said. "Or because they don't want to," Sophie countered. I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. That afternoon, after Sophie left, I sat alone again. But this time, the silence felt different. Less heavy, less suffocating. Because something had shifted. Not everything, but enough. And then, just as I was starting to feel that small sense of calm, my phone rang. Ethan. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello? Hey, he said. His voice was softer, not hesitant, just less guarded. Hi, I replied. There was a brief pause. I've been thinking, he said. I figured, I answered gently. He exhaled lightly. I went back through everything, he continued. The records, the timelines, what Reeves showed us. And I asked, and it lines up, he said. There was no doubt in his voice now, just acceptance. I know, I said. I should have seen it sooner, he added. No, I replied quickly. You saw what you were given. That's all anyone can do. He was quiet for a moment. I said some things, he said. I know. I meant them at the time, he admitted. I know that too. But they weren't fair, he added. I swallowed, because this was the part I hadn't let myself expect. I understand why you said them, I said. That doesn't make them right, he replied. No, it didn't, but hearing him say that mattered, more than I thought it would. I'm sorry, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they weren't defensive. They weren't conditional. They were just real. I closed my eyes briefly. Thank you, I said softly. There was another pause. I don't know how to fix all of this, he admitted. You don't have to fix everything, I said. Just start with what matters. And what's that? He asked. I hesitated, then answered honestly. Being honest, I said. With yourself, with Sophie, with me. He let that sit for a moment. I can do that, he said. I know you can. A few days later, he came by. Not announced, not planned, just like he used to. I opened the door, and for a moment, we both just stood there, taking it in. Everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. Hi, Mom, he said. Hi, Ethan, I replied. He stepped inside, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like he was entering as a stranger. Not completely, not anymore. We sat at the same table again, the same one where everything had fallen apart. But this time, it felt different. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. If Dad were here, he started, then paused. Do you think he would still make the same choice? I thought about it, about Charles, about the kind of man he was, the kind of father, the kind of husband. Yes, I said. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I think so too. He looked down at his hands. I wish he had trusted me enough to tell me, he admitted. I think he did trust you, I said. Then why not tell me? Because sometimes, I said gently, trust isn't about sharing the burden, it's about carrying it for someone else. He didn't respond right away, but I could see it. The understanding, slow, incomplete, but growing. And maybe that was enough. For now. It didn't happen all at once. Healing rarely does. There wasn't a single moment where everything suddenly felt normal again. No grand reconciliation, no dramatic apology that erased what had happened. Instead, it came in pieces. Small ones, fragile ones. The kind you don't always notice until you look back and realize how far you've come. Ethan started coming by more often. At first, it was brief visits, a quick conversation, a cup of coffee that went cold because we spent more time talking than drinking. He didn't stay long, and I didn't ask him to, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Trust doesn't return all at once. It rebuilds itself slowly, and if you rush it, you risk breaking it all over again. One afternoon, he showed up with a small paper bag. "I brought lunch," he said. That alone felt like something new. He used to come empty-handed, not because he didn't care, but because he never thought he needed to bring anything. Now he was trying, and that mattered more than anything inside that bag. We sat at the kitchen table again. Same chairs, same quiet house, but the air felt different, lighter. "Turkey sandwich," he said, pulling out the contents. "Your favorite." I smiled faintly. "You remembered." "Of course I did," he said, and for a moment it felt like nothing had changed. But then, as we started eating, the conversation shifted, not into conflict, but into something deeper. "I've been thinking about Dad," Ethan said. I nodded. "So have I." He stared down at his sandwich for a moment. "I used to think I understood him," he continued. "What he stood for. The kind of man he was." I waited. And now, I asked. He looked up. "Now I realize I only understood the version of him that was easy to see." That didn't surprise me. Charles had always been that way. Strong, steady, quiet about the things that mattered most. "There was more to him," I said, gently. "I know that now," Ethan replied. He paused. "Do you think he ever regretted it?" he asked. "Regretted what?" "What he did for me," Ethan said. "The choice he made." I thought about it, about the letter, about the way Charles had written it, not with pride, not with certainty, but with acceptance. "I think he understood the cost," I said. Ethan nodded slowly. "But do you think he ever wished he had done it differently?" That question lingered longer. Because it wasn't really about Charles. It was about Ethan. "I think," I said carefully, "that he would have wished things had never reached that point." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." Later that week, something happened I hadn't expected. Melissa came to see me, alone. No Ethan, no Sophie. Just her. When I opened the door, she stood there with that same composed posture she always carried. But her expression was different. Less certain, less controlled. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated for only a second, then stepped aside. "Of course." She walked in slowly, taking in the space. "I've never actually been here," she said. That struck me. All these years, and she had never stepped into my home. "No," I said. "You haven't." She nodded slightly. I guess I didn't think I needed to. There was something in the way she said it. Not defensive, just honest. We sat down across from each other, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled softly. "I don't like not understanding things," she said. I gave a small knowing smile. "Most people don't." She looked at me directly. "I built my life on clarity," she continued. "On facts. On things that make sense. I can see that. And this," she gestured slightly between us, "doesn't make sense." "No," I said. "It doesn't." She studied me for a moment. "But I was wrong about one thing," she admitted. That caught my attention. "What's that?" "I thought you were hiding something because you had something to hide," she said. "And now I think you were hiding something because you thought it was the right thing to do." I didn't respond. because that was as close to understanding as she had ever come. That doesn't mean I agree with it, she added quickly. I didn't expect you to, but it does mean, she paused, searching for the right words, that I misjudged you. That mattered more than she probably realized. Thank you, I said quietly. She nodded once. But I still have concerns, she continued. About what? About what happens next, she said. I leaned back slightly. That's fair, because now that Ethan knows she said this, doesn't just disappear. No, I agreed. It doesn't. She crossed her arms lightly. And Sophie knows enough to keep asking questions. Yes, and there are still loose ends. I knew what she meant. The kind of things that don't stay buried forever. The kind that resurface when you least expect them. You're worried it could come back, I said. I'm worried it already has, she replied. That was honest. And not entirely wrong. But I'm also worried about something else, she added. What? She hesitated, then said it. I'm worried about what this does to Ethan. I looked at her carefully. How so? He's carrying something now, she said. Something he didn't ask for. Something he didn't even know existed. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. He is. And I don't know how to help him with that, she admitted. There it was. Not control, not judgment. Concern. Real concern. You don't fix that by removing it, I said gently. Then how, she asked. You help him carry it, I replied. She frowned slightly. That doesn't sound like a solution. It's not, I said. It's support. She was quiet for a moment, taking that in. I'm not used to that, she admitted. I know. She looked at me again. But I'm willing to try. That surprised me, and in that moment I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not an adversary, not someone standing between me and my son, but someone who was trying, in her own way. After she left, I sat alone again. But this time, it didn't feel like isolation. It felt like space. Space for things to settle, for things to grow, for something new to take shape. Because the truth had come out. The silence had broken. And while it hadn't fixed everything, it had changed something important. We weren't pretending anymore. And sometimes, that's where real healing begins. There's a strange moment in healing that no one really talks about. It's not the beginning, when everything is raw and painful. And it's not the end, when things finally feel whole again. It's the middle, the part where nothing is broken anymore. It's not the beginning when everything is raw and painful. And it's not the end when things finally feel whole again. It's the middle, the part where nothing is broken anymore, but nothing feels fully safe yet either. That's where we were. Ethan started bringing Sophie with him, not every time, but enough that it began to feel intentional, like he wasn't just rebuilding something with me. He was rebuilding something for her. One Sunday afternoon, they both showed up together. Sophie walked in first, smiling in that quiet way she had when she felt comfortable. Ethan followed behind, carrying a box. "What's that?" I asked. "Old stuff," he said. "From Dad's office." My heart skipped slightly. "Why?" He set the box down on the table. "I thought maybe we should go through it together." That surprised me. Not because of the box, but because of what it meant. For so long, the past had been something we avoided, something we stepped around carefully. Now, he was bringing it forward, on purpose. We sat down, the three of us, and slowly, carefully, we opened it. Inside were papers, photographs, small personal items Charles had kept over the years. Things that didn't mean much on their own, but together told a story. His story. Our story. Sophie picked up an old photograph. "Is this you?" she asked, holding it up. It was a picture of Ethan as a teenager standing awkwardly next to Charles. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "That was taken right before your dad's first big interview." Ethan laughed softly. "I remember that," he said. "I thought I was going to mess it up completely." "You almost didn't go." "Yes," I said. "That was taken right before your dad's first big interview." Ethan laughed softly. "I remember that," he said. "I thought I was going to mess it up completely." "You almost didn't go," I reminded him. "Yeah," he admitted. "Dad practically dragged me there." Sophie looked between us. "He didn't seem like the kind of person who would force you to do anything," she said. Ethan glanced at me, then back at her. "He didn't force me," he said. "He just believed in me more than I did." That hung in the air for a moment, because now it meant something different. We kept going through the box, letter by letter, photo by photo, memory by memory. And somewhere in the middle of it all, something shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. Ethan wasn't just remembering his father anymore. He was starting to understand him. Later that afternoon, Sophie went into the living room to take a call, leaving just the two of us at the table. Ethan leaned back slightly, looking at the scattered contents in front of us. "I spent so much time being angry," he said. I didn't respond, because I knew. "I thought I had been wronged," he continued, "that something had been taken from me." Slightly looking at the scattered contents in front of us. "I spent so much time being angry," he said. I didn't respond, because I knew. "I thought I had been wronged," he continued, "that something had been taken from me." He looked at me, and in a way, I guess it had. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "it had." He frowned slightly. "That doesn't bother you?" "It does," I admitted, "but not in the way you think." He studied me. "How then? Because what was taken from you," I said carefully. "What was taken from you," I said carefully, "was also something that protected you." He looked down again. "I keep going back and forth," he said. "Part of me is grateful, and part of me is angry that I didn't get to choose." "That's normal, as also something that protected you." He looked down again. "I keep going back and forth," he said. "Part of me is grateful, and part of me is angry that I didn't get to choose." "That's normal," I said gently. "It doesn't feel normal," he replied. "No," I said. "It feels complicated." He let out a quiet breath. "Do you ever wish you had told me anyway?" he asked. I thought about it, about all the moments I could have said something, all the times I almost did. "Yes," I said honestly. He looked up. "Really?" "Yes," I said. "Because it would have been easier for me." He nodded slightly. "But it wouldn't have been easier for you," I added. That made him pause, and for a moment I saw it again. That understanding, that slow, steady acceptance. "I think I'm starting to see that," he said. Melissa came later that evening. This time, she didn't knock hesitantly. She walked in with a quiet confidence that felt different, less rigid, less guarded. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. She glanced at the table. "You started without me." Ethan gave a small smile. "We didn't think you'd want to go through old paperwork." She shrugged lightly. I didn't think I would either. That alone felt like progress. She sat down beside him, picking up one of the letters. "What is this?" she asked. "Something Dad wrote," Ethan said. She skimmed it briefly, then looked up. "He was thoughtful," she said. It wasn't a grand statement, but it was honest, and that mattered. We spent the next hour together, not arguing, not defending, just sharing stories, memories, pieces of the past that had been hidden, forgotten, or misunderstood. And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were standing on opposite sides of something. It felt like we were standing in the same place, trying to understand it together. Later that night, after they left, I stood by the window, the same one Ethan had stood by just days ago, looking out into the quiet street. But everything felt different now. Not perfect, not finished, but changed. The silence that once separated us had become something else. Not a wall, but a space where truth had entered, where pain had surfaced, where understanding was slowly taking root. And I realized something. The promise I had kept all those months, it had done what it was meant to do. It had protected Ethan when he needed it most. But now, he didn't need protection anymore. He needed truth. And maybe that was the real purpose of the promise. Not to hold the truth forever, but to carry it until the moment someone was strong enough to face it. And now, he was. There's a quiet kind of ending that doesn't feel like an ending at all. No final argument, no dramatic resolution. Just a moment where you realize something has changed, and it's not going back. It happened on a Thursday evening. Nothing special about the day. No anniversaries, no holidays, just an ordinary moment that turned into something more. Ethan had called earlier that afternoon. "Can you come over tonight?" he asked. For a split second, my heart hesitated, not because I didn't want to go, but because of what that invitation meant. It wasn't just a visit, it was a step, a decision. "Yes," I said. "It'll be there." When I arrived, the house felt different, not unfamiliar, but settled, like something inside it had shifted just like we had. Sophie opened the door before I could knock. "Grandma," she said, smiling. That smile, it had come back fully now. Not cautious, not uncertain, just real. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, stepping inside. Ethan was in the kitchen. Melissa stood beside him, and for a brief moment, all three of them looked at me in a way that felt whole. Not perfect, but together. "Hi, Mom," Ethan said. "Hi," I replied. There was a small pause. Then Melissa stepped forward slightly. "We're making dinner?" she said. I raised an eyebrow. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's a group effort." That made me laugh softly. "Well," I said, "I hope you've improved since the last time I saw you cook." Sophie laughed. "He hasn't," she said, "but he's trying." And there it was again. That word, trying. It seemed to follow all of us now, and maybe that was enough. We ate together that night, not like before, not like everything had been erased, but like people who had gone through something and were still choosing to sit at the same table. The conversation wasn't heavy. It wasn't about money, or secrets, or mistakes. It was about small things. Work, school, stories from the past that didn't carry weight anymore. And yet, underneath it all, there was something deeper, something unspoken, but understood. After dinner, Sophie went upstairs, leaving the three of us in the kitchen. Ethan leaned against the counter, his arms crossed loosely. Melissa stood beside him, quieter than usual. And I stood across from them, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not tension, not distance, just presence. "I've been thinking about something," Ethan said. I nodded. "About what?" "About what you said," he continued. "That you stayed silent to protect me. I stayed still, listening." "I didn't understand that at first," he admitted. "It felt like you were choosing something else over me." My chest tightened slightly. But now he added, "I think I understand it differently." I waited. "You weren't choosing something over me," he said. "You were choosing for me." The words settled into the space between us, soft but powerful. "Yes," I said quietly. "That's exactly what I was doing." He nodded slowly. "I don't know if I would have made the same choice," he admitted. "I don't know if I would have wanted you to." That was honest, and it mattered. "But I do know this," he continued. He looked directly at me. "You didn't stay silent because you were guilty." He paused. "You stayed silent because you loved me." My eyes filled slightly. "Yes," I whispered. Melissa shifted slightly beside him. "I still don't agree with everything that was done," she said. I nodded. "I understand, but—" She hesitated, then continued. "I understand why you did it now." That was enough, more than enough, because understanding doesn't mean agreement. It just means seeing someone clearly. And for the first time, she did. Ethan stepped closer. Not all the way, but closer than before. "There's one more thing," he said. "What is it?" He took a breath. "I don't want there to be anything else between us like that again," he said. "No more silence. No more things we don't talk about." I nodded. "I agree. Even if it's hard," he added. "Especially then," I said. He gave a small smile. And in that moment, something that had been broken finally started to feel whole again. Later that night, as I drove home, I realized something. The promise I had kept. It hadn't just protected Ethan. It had protected something else. The possibility that one day he would be strong enough to understand it. And now, he was. When I walked into my house, the silence was still there. But it wasn't the same. It didn't feel heavy or empty. It felt peaceful. Because, for the first time in months, I wasn't carrying something alone anymore. The truth had come out. The distance had been crossed. And what remained was something real. Not perfect, not untouched, but real. Sometimes silence isn't guilt. Sometimes it's love. The kind of love that carries weight. The kind that makes choices no one else sees. The kind that risks being misunderstood just to protect someone else. And sometimes that love is only understood later. When the truth finally has a place to land. I stood in the quiet of my living room, looking at the old photographs on the wall, at the life we had built, at the people we had become. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. We hadn't lost everything. We had just gone through something that changed us. And now we were finding our way back. Not to what we were, but to something stronger, something honest, something that could hold both truth and love at the same time. And maybe that was what we had needed all along. Sometimes the hardest truths in life are not the ones that expose wrongdoing, but the ones that reveal love hidden beneath silence. This story is a reminder that not all silence means guilt. Sometimes silence is sacrifice. Sometimes it's protection. And sometimes it's the only way someone knows how to love when the truth feels too dangerous to speak. Luke Whitaker chose to carry a burden that wasn't hers, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to endure being misunderstood. Her silence cost her trust, her relationship with her son, and her place in her own family, at least for a time. But what makes this story powerful isn't the secret. It's what happened after. When the truth came out, it didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the distance. But it created something new, understanding. And from that understanding came something even more important, healing. Ethan learned that love doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice. And sometimes it looks like a choice made long before we're ready to understand it. If you've ever been misunderstood, if you've ever carried something in silence for someone you love, then you know how heavy that can feel. So I want to ask you, have you ever stayed silent to protect someone, even when it cost you everything? Do you think Luke made the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this story touched, you don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about family truth and the kind of love that isn't always easy, but is always real.